Welcome to another edition of the Backyard Professor videos. I'm Kerry Schertz, the Backyard Professor. In the really informative and quite remarkable Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, Volume 5, Number 1, Spring 1996, John Twetness has some ideas on page 147, 148, and 149 that I'd like to share with you. The Illiad and the Book of Mormon. The Iliad, an ancient Greek epic written by Homer, tells the story of the Trojan War. Though Homer probably lived about 800 BC, the date of the war itself is generally acknowledged to be about 1200 BC. One of the results of the war and other conflicts of the time was the influx of Anatolian peoples from the sea around Troy into the southeastern Mediterranean region, notably Egypt and Palestine. Known to the Egyptians collectively as the Sea Peoples, they included such groups as the Philistines, and their weaponry and armor and chariots is what so impressed the Israelites. It's in this light that we note some of the elements in the Book of Mormon that have their parallels in the Iliad. For example, Laban's sword with its sheath, its golden hilt, and precious steel blade, 1 Nephi 4:9. This is reminiscent of some of the swords of some of the military leaders in Homer's epic. Menelaus had a silver-studded sword, or a gold-studded sword, depending on which part of the Iliad you're reading, and Hector is said to have given Ajax a silver-studded sword with the sheath. Achilles' sword was bronze with silver studs, and had a silver hilt. The god Apollo, who participated in the war, fought with a golden sword. We can also compare Nephi's steel bow to the silver bow carried by Apollo. When describing the weaponry and armor of the Nephites, Alma noted that they were also dressed with thick clothing, Alma 43:19. In the Iliad, there are numerous descriptions of the bronze weapons and armor, including breastplates and greaves worn on both the arms and the legs of the warriors, as in the Book of Mormon passage. Of special interest is in the Iliad 2:830 draws our attention to the use of a linen breastplate, which might correspond to the thick clothing used by the Nephites. Some of the battle tactics noted in the Iliad are also similar to those in the Book of Mormon, although there's notable differences because the circumstances and the time was different. The Achaeans, for example, built a stone fortification wall and surrounded it by a ditch, placing sharp stakes at the top of the ditch to slow down any possible Trojan attack on their camp. That's in the Illiad 12:52-57. The Nephite general Moroni constructed similar fortifications in Alma 49:18 and Alma 53:3 and 4. In 1 Nephi 3:31-4:1, we read that Laman commanded a group of 50 men plus tens of thousands. Hugh Nibley has elicited evidence that there were, in the time of Lehi, military units corresponding to 50 men that were called the 50 in the Babylonian records. And Laban was a military commander of a local garrison, and Nephi came across him drunk in the streets, and Laban was dressed in full armor and wearing the precious sword that so impressed Nephi. Homer tells us that Achilles brought to the Trojan War 50 ships with 50 men each, and had 5 battalion leaders among them. The Nephites were wont to fight for their wives, their children, and their lands. That's in Alma 35:14 and 43:9 and 44:5, so on and so forth. Indeed, the Nephite general Moroni rallied his forces with the cry to defend their religion, their freedom, their peace, their wives, their children, writing these values on a piece of cloth that he called the title of liberty, after which, girding on his armor, he carried it around, Alma 46. In a similar manner, during the Trojan War, Nestor admonished the Achaean troops to remember their children, their wives, their properties, and their parents, whether dead or alive. There are other similarities as well. For example, just as King Mosiah's son Ammon smote off the arms of a number of men who attacked him with clubs, Alma 11, or Alma 17, I should say, and Alma 18, during the Trojan War, King Menelaus cut off the arm of Hippolochus at the shoulder with a single stroke of the sword.
Such parallels lend authenticity to the stories told in the Book of Mormon and lead me to believe that the Nephite record accurately reflects, to a certain extent, the old world culture from which Lehi came. However, it would not surprise me to see the critics now adding the Illiad to a list of the sources from which they believe Joseph Smith got ideas to write his Book of Mormon. Just how many books can this untutored 19th century farm lad really have read and put together the Book of Mormon with? That's quite a question. That's quite an interesting analysis of old world parallels in literature, isn't it? This argument that the Book of Mormon has nothing in its favor, that it has no realistic content, that it's just made up, this argument is simply false.